The legend of Sleepy Hollow was popular enough nearly 100 years ago for one of Hollywood's biggest stars at the time, Will Rogers, to take a stab at bringing the ghost story to the big screen. It was first published 200 years ago by Washington Irving, considered by many to be the father of the American short story. Sleepy Hollow may be America's all-time great ghost story, and 2 centuries later is still linked forever to Halloween. Today, we visit the history of this classic tale in the spot where it all began. Most people passing by these days don't even know it's there. But 25 miles north of New York City, in a place overlooking the Hudson River, the legend of the headless horseman took off. I can't think of a more iconic Halloween character than the headless horseman.
He really is the one. He's kind of the original American ghost story, and he's our arch villain. Elizabeth Bradley is an author, an expert on the man who first told of the horseman 200 years ago, Washington Irving. He wrote here. He did, and he wrote in that room right there. That was his study. We spoke to Bradley at Irving's famed Sunnyside estate. The stories he wrote were witty, mischievous, anarchic, and they have really formed the foundation for so much of American literature. Mischievous is a good word for it. Definitely, definitely. Set shortly after the American Revolution, Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow unspools the story of Ichabod Crane, an oddball outsider who arrives in town and pursues a beautiful young woman, Katrina Van Tassel. He is then himself pursued by a local phantom known as the Headless Horseman. As legend goes, the horseman was a Hessian soldier who lost his head to a cannonball while fighting for the British. He was buried, but it's said he rises from his grave every night in search of his missing skull. The original tale, just 24 pages long, seems to grow more famous each year. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow was popular when it was first published, but it was not the totemic story that we know it today. Nobody had heard of the Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman was Irving's really to invent in the form in which it took in that story. The story has spawned countless adaptations, most notably Disney's 1949 classic, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. And the 1999 Tim Burton film Sleepy Hollow, starring Johnny Depp. Horseman! When people revisit the legend of Sleepy Hollow today, what should they think? I think they should take the time to appreciate the imagery and the way in which it's inspired all of the adaptations. There is something about the mystery and the way in which Irving describes the landscape as being one of contagion that I think really describes our own obsession with Halloween today. That contagion takes on an even more eerie relevance these days. Guess what else was happening a little more than 200 years ago? Washington Irving fled a pandemic. He did. He did. He came to this region first as a teenager, and the reason he did so is because New York was experiencing an epidemic of yellow fever. So people trying to get out of a major city into the suburbs. Very much as they are today. Irving's Sunnyside is still open to visitors, but because of our current pandemic, no one is allowed inside, where his writing desk and the bedroom where he died in 1859 have been preserved. People of all ages come to hear the stories about the legend and its author, whose penchant for mischief is on full display. 1656 is just a date that Irving put up for the fun of it. You know, this is a little touch of the ways in which Irving liked to play with ideas of authenticity, with the notion of history being fixed. So people walk by this and say 1656, and like, what does that mean? They think that the house, as we see it today, must have all been built in 1656, and I think Irving would have loved that. But it's not true at all. It's not true. No, there would have been a very small farmhouse here. Not far away from the house, the graveyard at the old Dutch church where the horseman is said to roam is also a tourist attraction today. So he just hangs out here. That is what they say. We can come back after dark if you'd like to test that theory. Irving is buried in the adjacent Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. Part of what makes this region feel so charmed and possibly haunted is that not only is his home here, but his gravesite is here, and they're both accessible to anyone who wants to come and see them.
The cemetery even features a bridge, not unlike one that figures prominently in the legend. People know it as the Horseman Bridge.
They know it. They insist this must be the bridge. You know, at the base of this bridge is where they were meant to have found a shattered pumpkin and the saddle of the horse Ichabod rode, and no Ichabod, and he was never seen again.
At least on the pages of Irving's story. What's your favorite version of the story?
I'd say Irving's because there's so much magic in it and there's so much detail and mystery to be mined, and there's a lot of comedy too that people tend to lose sight of.
But the ending in Irving's version remains nebulous.
Yes, it's purposefully vague, I think, and that's part of Irving's genius.
That means that the headless horseman then could still be
yes,
out here.
Absolutely. He's ageless. So yeah, just, you know, don't look behind you.
Shout out to Seth Fox, his first producer piece there.
Oh,
He did a great job with it. A couple other notes. North Tarrytown actually renamed itself, a town in New York, to Sleepy Hollow 25 years ago to capitalize on the story's fame, which is interesting. And the interesting thing about the story in general, the first 24 pages, it's so pliable that there's a version you can find for kids, adults. I mean, Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, not for kids, not for kids.
My favorite. I just love Tim Burton's version.
It's a very good movie, but not for kids. Ichabod and Mr. Toad is for kids.
Totally for kids.
Right?